This is the biggest piston engine America ever built. And it never flew a single mile. 36 cylinders, 7,755 cubic inches of displacement, 5,000 horsepower. It stood 10 feet long and 5 feet across, weighed over 3 tons, and drank 580 gallons of fuel every hour it ran at full power. When they tested it inside a factory in a quiet Pennsylvania town, it shook the cans off the shelves of the grocery store down the street. The company had to send workers over to fix little strips along the shelf edges just to keep the neighbors' canned goods from vibrating onto the floor. They built exactly 2 of them. Neither one ever left the ground. This is the story of the Lycoming XR-7755, the largest aircraft piston engine ever manufactured in the United States, and one of the most extraordinary machines American industry ever produced. It was a mechanical masterpiece designed by men with slide rules and no computers. It had features that wouldn't show up in ordinary cars for another 50 years. And by the time it first roared to life, it was already obsolete. Not because it failed, because it succeeded completely at the exact moment the entire technology it represented was rendered pointless overnight. So how do you build the biggest, most advanced engine of its kind on Earth and end up with a museum piece that never flew? This is the story of the machine that hit the ceiling of an entire era. In 1940, the airplane engine is the beating heart of military power, and the rule is brutally simple. More power means more range, more bombs, more speed, more altitude. And the way you make more power in 1940 is displacement. You make the engine bigger, you add cylinders. Every major air power on Earth is locked in the same race, chasing horsepower by chasing size. The piston engine works by a cycle of explosions inside cylinders. Fuel and air ignite, a piston is driven down. That motion turns a crankshaft, and the crankshaft turns a propeller. Want more power? Add more cylinders. A fighter might have 12. A big bomber engine of the era might have 18, arranged in 2 rows of 9 in a circle, what engineers call a radial. The problem is that the more cylinders you pack around a crankshaft, the harder they are to cool, because the ones hidden behind the front row are starved of air. Push the count too high and the back cylinders cook themselves. By the early 1940s, the American aircraft engine industry is bumping against that wall. Pratt & Whitney is building a monster called the R-4360, 28 cylinders in 4 rows, spiraled like an ear of corn so air can reach every row. It's the biggest piston aircraft engine that would ever reach mass production. But even it has a cooling problem in the rear cylinders that engineers would fight for years. And here is the thing about that ceiling. The American military wanted to go far past it. In the spring of 1941, before the United States had even entered the war, the Army Air Corps issued a requirement so extreme it read like science fiction. They wanted a bomber that could take off from North America, fly across the Atlantic, strike targets in Europe, and fly home, without landing, without refueling. A round trip of nearly 10,000 miles. Why would anyone ask for something that insane because of what had just happened in Europe? In the summer of 1940, France fell to Germany in 6 weeks. Britain stood alone under nightly bombing, and to a lot of serious people in Washington, it genuinely looked like Britain might fall too. And if Britain fell, the United States would lose every airfield within reach of Nazi Germany. The Atlantic Ocean would become the last moat America had. If the country was going to fight Hitler after that, it would have to do it from its own soil across 3,000 miles of open water and come home again. They called it hemispheric defense. And that single terrifying requirement is what set in motion the largest piston engine this country would ever build. That bomber requirement eventually produced one of the most famous aircraft in history, the Convair B-36. But to fly a plane that size that far, you needed engines with 2 qualities that usually fight each other: colossal power for takeoff and miserly fuel economy for the 10,000-mile cruise. No existing engine could do both, so the Army went looking for someone to build one from scratch, and the company that raised its hand was not one of the famous aviation names. It was a firm in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, better known, until recently, for building engines for luxury automobiles. To understand how strange that is, you have to understand Lycoming. In the 1920s and 30s, Lycoming was part of the empire of a flamboyant industrialist named E.L. Cord. If you know classic cars, you know his names: Auburn, Cord, and Duesenberg, some of the most beautiful and expensive automobiles America ever produced. Lycoming built their engines. The magnificent straight-eight in a Duesenberg, the engine of Hollywood stars and tycoons, came from Williamsport. But the luxury car market died in the Depression, and by the late 1930s, Lycoming had thrown itself entirely into aircraft engines. The company had ambition that ran far ahead of its reputation. For years, it had been chasing a military goal of 1 horsepower per cubic inch, and its earlier big engines had been beaten out by rivals. One of them, a 24-cylinder design, actually flew in an experimental fighter called the Vultee XP-54 and still never reached production. Lycoming had swung for the fences before and missed more than once. The XR-7755 was going to be the biggest swing of all. The team was led by an engineering vice president named Clarence Wiegman, and the chief engineer in that era was a man named Samuel Hoffman, who would later go on to run Rocketdyne and help build the rocket engines that launched Americans toward the moon. These were serious people, and what they set out to design, starting around 1943, was not just big. It was one of the most sophisticated piston engines ever conceived. Here is where the story stops being about size and starts being about genius. Stand next to the XR-7755 and the first thing that breaks your brain is the scale. This is not an engine you lean over. It's an engine you walk around, 10 feet long, 5 feet in diameter. 3 tons of aluminum and steel. A single intake valve from one of its cylinders is bigger than your hand and weighs more than a pound. And it has 36 of the cylinders, each one roughly the size of a small car's entire engine, arranged not in the usual rows, but in 9 banks of 4, wrapped around a central crankshaft like the chambers of some mechanical heart. Now, why 9 banks of 4? This is the first stroke of brilliance. Remember the cooling problem, the reason you couldn't just keep adding cylinders to a radial? Lycoming sidestepped it entirely by making the engine liquid-cooled. Instead of relying on air to reach cylinders hidden behind other cylinders, they wrapped everything in water jackets and pumped coolant through the whole structure. That freed them to line the cylinders up in neat rows and pack in 36 of them without cooking the ones in the back. The cooling pump alone moved 750 gallons of coolant a minute, the output of a fire engine shedding enough heat to warm an average house. But the truly astonishing part is hidden inside. The XR-7755 had variable valve timing. If you know cars, you know that phrase, technology that changes how the engine's valves open depending on whether you want power or efficiency. Most drivers think of it as a modern feature, something from the 1990s and after. Lycoming built it into this engine in 1944. Each bank of cylinders had a camshaft ground with 2 completely different sets of lobes. One profile shaped for maximum takeoff power, another for economical cruising. And the entire camshaft physically slid sideways to bring the profile you needed over the valves. Full power for the launch, then slide to economy for the long haul across the ocean. In 1944, calculated on slide rules, by hand, and it didn't stop there. The engine drove 2 propellers, spinning in opposite directions on the same axis, what's called a contra-rotating propeller, to put all 5,000 horsepower into the air without the torque share physically trying to roll the aircraft over. The gearbox that did it had 2 speeds, like a transmission. The engine was so enormous it needed 2 starter motors just to turn it over. 2 magnetos, 4 distributors, 72 spark plugs. Let that sink in. While most of the world's engineers were still fighting to keep the back cylinders of a radial from overheating, a team in a Pennsylvania factory town, working with slide rules and drafting tables, designed a 36-cylinder, liquid-cooled, variable valve-timed, contra-rotating monster that made 5,000 horsepower. It was arguably the most complex piston aircraft engine ever built by anyone, anywhere. And they didn't just draw it and hope. Before the full engine ever ran, Lycoming logged something like 10,000 hours of testing on single cylinders alone, proving out the combustion, the valves, the cooling, one piece at a time. In October of 1945, They rolled a version of the engine out in public at an Army Air Forces exhibition at Wright Field, still fitted with dummy propeller shafts, just to show the country what was coming. This was not a sketch. This was the real thing, most of the way to finished. And when they finally ran it at full power, the whole neighborhood knew. Picture the test cell in Williamsport. The engine sits bolted to the stand, and when they open it up, it swallows fuel at a rate of roughly 20 fluid ounces every single second. The coolant pump is roaring like a fire truck. The exhaust is a physical pressure you feel in your chest. The factory sat in a residential part of town, and when they ran it wide open, windows rattled in a school half a mile away, and cans walked off the shelves of the corner grocery. Lycoming, being a good neighbor, sent its own workers down to shore up the shelves so the neighbors could stop losing their soup. They had done it. Against every engineering limit of the era, they had built the largest, most advanced piston aircraft engine in American history. 2 prototypes, hand-assembled, roaring on the test stand in 1946. There was just one problem. By 1946, nobody needed it anymore. While Lycoming was perfecting the largest piston engine on Earth, a much quieter revolution had been building in laboratories in Britain and Germany, and it was about to make the entire concept obsolete. The jet engine. Here is the tragedy written into the timeline. The XR-7755 was conceived in 1943 and first ran in 1946. But across those exact same years, the turbojet went from experimental curiosity to operational reality. Germany flew jet fighters in combat before the war ended. Britain had jets in the air, and American engineers could see with total clarity where it led. A jet had almost no reciprocating parts, no pistons hammering up and down, no cylinders to cool, no propeller fighting the speed of sound at its tips. It was lighter, it was simpler, and it could push an aircraft faster than any propeller ever could. The piston engine had been climbing a mountain for 40 years, and the XR-7755 was the summit. But while everyone was racing to the top of that mountain, the jet engine had quietly built an airport at the bottom of a taller one. Watch how fast it happened. The bomber, the XR-7755 was designed for, the B-36, flew for the first time in August of 1946. It did not use the Lycoming engine. It flew on 6 of Pratt & Whitney's R-4360s, the corncob radials, mounted backwards as pushers. And when the Air Force decided the B-36 needed more speed, they did not reach for a bigger piston engine. They bolted 4 jet engines under the wings, in addition to the 6 propellers. The crews had a phrase for lighting all 10 off: 6 turning and 4 burning. 6 propellers turning, 4 jets burning. That phrase is the whole story in 5 words. When the American military wanted more performance out of its largest aircraft in the late 1940s, the answer was not a bigger piston engine. It was jets. The single most powerful piston aircraft engine ever built in this country had been rendered unnecessary before it ever left the test stand. And so, in 1946, the program was cancelled. The requirement that justified it, that terrifying 1941 fear of a fallen Britain, was gone. The war was won. And the technology it represented was a dead end. 2 engines had been built. They had cost the government several $1 million and consumed the finest engineering talent Lycoming had. And they would never power an aircraft. Not one flight, not one. Here is what makes this different from an ordinary failure. The XR-7755 did not break. Read that carefully. The engineers did everything right. The engine ran. It made its power. Every marvel worked. The variable valve timing, the contra-rotating props, the liquid cooling, all of it functioned. This was not a story of a broken machine. It was a story of a perfect machine arriving into a world that had just stopped needing what it did. And there is a cruel piece of arithmetic hiding inside this story. Remember Pratt & Whitney's R-4360, the corncob? That engine was smaller and less powerful than the Lycoming, but it made it into production, nearly 19,000 of them, powering bombers and airliners and cargo planes for a decade. So the record ends up split in a strange way. The R-4360 is the biggest piston aircraft engine America ever mass-produced. And the XR-7755 is the biggest America ever built, period. The difference between those two sentences is the difference between a legend and a museum piece. One was big enough and early enough to matter. The other was bigger, and it was too late, and that is the deeper trap, the one that catches entire industries, not just companies. Lycoming and Pratt and Whitney and every other builder chasing displacement had poured everything into perfecting a technology right as it reached its natural ceiling. More cylinders, more displacement, more cooling complexity. Each step took more engineering and returned less. The XR-7755 was what the absolute end of that road looked like. Staggeringly complex, monstrously large, and beaten by a simpler machine that made all that complexity irrelevant. When a technology is about to be replaced, its final versions are often its most magnificent and its most doomed. So what happened to the men, the company, and the two engines that were left? The company remarkably thrived, but only because it let go of the giant. Lycoming did not chain itself to the biggest engine it had ever built. In one of the quiet, smart pivots in industrial history, it turned almost completely away from giant engines and towards small ones. After the war, Lycoming threw its expertise into modest, reliable, air-cooled engines for small private aircraft, the 4- and 6-cylinder engines that power the Cessnas and Pipers of the world. That decision is the reason Lycoming is still here. Today, Lycoming of Williamsport, Pennsylvania, has built more than 325,000 aircraft engines and powers more than half the world's general aviation fleet. The company that built the largest, most doomed piston engine in American history survived by building some of the smallest. It didn't defend the giant. It walked away from it. And that is exactly why it lived. The engineers scattered into a changing industry, and some of them went on to extraordinary things. Remember Samuel Hoffman, the chief engineer? He went to Rocketdyne and helped lead the development of the giant rocket engines that would one day sit under the Saturn V and carry Americans to the moon. The men who had been chasing the ultimate piston engine simply changed mountains. The skill was never the problem. The technology under them had shifted, and the best of them shifted with it. And the engines themselves? 2 were built and run on the stand, and there are hints Lycoming may have started a third with fuel injection, though the trail on that one goes cold. What we know for certain is that one complete engine survives. If you want to see it, you can. It sits today in the Boeing Aviation Hangar at the Smithsonian's Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center, just outside Washington in Virginia. You can walk right up to it, and I want you to picture standing there. Because this is where the whole story lands. In front of you is 10 feet and 3 tons of gleaming, intricate machinery, 36 cylinders, 9 banks of 4, the contra-rotating propeller shaft, the sliding camshafts hidden inside, every piece of it a small miracle of 1940s engineering, calculated by hand, cast and machined and assembled by people who believed they were building the future of flight. And it is dead silent. It has never flown. It never will. It is the single most impressive engine in the room, and it is a monument to a road that ended. One of the Lycoming veterans who kept this story alive used to joke that he'd love to borrow the engine from the museum, take it out to the air races, and prop a sign against it that read, "Orders now being taken." It's a good joke because it hurts a little. Nobody was ever going to place an order. There was never going to be a third one on a production line. The XR-7755 was the last and the largest of its kind, the final perfect, useless masterpiece of the piston age, finished at the exact moment the jet age began. We didn't lose Lycoming. Lycoming is thriving. What was lost was something stranger and quieter, the entire future that this engine was built to have. 36 cylinders of it, sitting motionless under museum lights, the greatest answer American industry ever engineered to a question the world stopped asking. If you found this story fascinating, hit subscribe. We're building the largest archive of industrial and engineering history on YouTube, and the engineers who built machines like this one, by hand, with slide rules, deserve to be remembered. A like on this video helps more people find it. And if you've ever stood in front of the XR-7755 yourself, or know something about the machines and the people who built them, drop it in the comments. I read them all. I'll see you on the next one.